Something is screwy with Little Nightmares now. And I don't just mean the fact that we're getting a 3 that's not made by Tarsier Studios. Have you guys heard about the podcast? The podcast that is out, that is, like, on the website for Little Nightmares, like, on the Steam page for it and everything. It is troublesome. It introduced a few concepts that are difficult to reconcile with our current understanding of the world of Little Nightmares. It mentions the ferryman, for instance, right off the bat, so we know then that, like, it means that there's at least comics adjacent, and maybe game adjacent, and might be canonical, but its framework is that, okay, there's a girl in a mental hospital who calls herself Noon, spelled like no one. And she has sessions with this psychiatrist, where she talks about her horrible nightmares, and it's in those nightmares that she experiences the world, at least tangential to, that which we are familiar with in the games. That means that on a base level, there is more than one world. There's the diegetic real world, in which the counselor and Noon reside, and then there's the realm of the nightmares, called the Nowhere, where all of the stuff from the games and the comics and everything comes from. From this point on, it is spoilers territory for the podcast, and I guess for the games as well as the comics and basically everything. You have been warned. The counselor is doing some kind of research regarding the concept of mutual dreaming and shared subconsciousness, and it becomes pretty clear very early on that he lost someone in his younger days that was very close to him in the world of the nightmares, when that person was also very young. And it turns out to be his sister. We are led to believe it might be his daughter or something like that. But no, it's actually his sister, and I don't really know if that's as big of a twist as they wanted it to be, but it's fine. It happened when they were both children, and he has since basically devoted his entire life to figuring out what happened to her and how to get her back. Noon shows like a remarkable similarity to the counselor Otto. The counselor's name is Otto, to Otto's sister, and as a result, he takes interest in her case. Now, Noon had, sometime in the past, recently, some sort of illness called water sickness, which I am choosing not to do any real-world research into to see if it was a real thing, specifically because I want this to be a completely new criticist deep dive into the lore and the story of this thing, such that you only need to know what is in this story to understand what is in this story. You don't need to worry about, like, things that have happened in the actual real world in which you and I live. There was a cure for water sickness that was given to her, which ostensibly gets rid of this sickness. But then it was only after her cure-based recovery that she began having these horrible nightmares. And these nightmares exhibited, like, exceptionally uncommon aspects to them, like having a sense of smell, having the ability to read. They must have matched with the elements of Otto's sister's dreams closely enough to make him take interest in Noon's case. Noon's actual name is Ruth. That comes up later. She's chosen the name Noon for herself, and that's one of the things that they talk about at the very beginning. Otto, the counselor, is like, I will refer to her with the chosen name instead of as a patient number, because this feels disingenuous or whatever. He takes on her psychiatry case, and at the beginning, it seems like he's trying legitimately to help her through her issues. This is before we know anything about him and his issues himself. However, this is not the case because all adults are villains. In this franchise, every adult is a villain. If you are not a child, you are a villain. Otto is actually tricking her into taking sedatives in the form of these little hard candy rewards at the end of her sessions, so that he can force her into the dreaming state and get closer to his weird mad science device that, or so he claims, synchronizes brainwave patterns between two participants while they are asleep, such that one can enter the other's mind and experience their dreams as well. A lot of emphasis is put on the ferryman, or the Candleman, as Noon calls him. Not the same Candleman as the series that I played a long time ago, different thing altogether, though I do think it would be very funny if that's the thing that Noon was thinking about and not the ferryman from the thing. But anyway, he shows up in several places in Noon's dreams, and in Cece, Otto's sister's dreams as well, and offers up sort of like cryptic and ominous riddles, if they can actually be called riddles, to her in order to get her to stay in the nightmare world. And it seems like his whole deal, based on the comics, based on the podcast, based on all of the legitimate information we have about him, is to get children and bring them back to the Maw. However, his retrieval service does not seem limited to the world of the Maw and the school and the radio tower, the in-game world, which the podcast calls the Nowhere, like I mentioned. Because apart from being on the hunt for lost children and offering them a hand there, like we saw with Six in the first run of the comics, he apparently also targets children in the quote-unquote real world in order to get them to cross into the Nowhere and stay there permanently. It seems that his abilities extends to actually physically translocating such dreaming children bodily to the Nowhere, because we see this happen with Noon when she's sleeping. She just straight up vanishes and then reappears later on. Otto the counselor documents this. He's sitting there like, Noon vanished last night. She was there, and then she was gone. And I don't know what to do about that. And this happens several times for longer and longer each time. That must also either be power of the child, or the power of the Nowhere, or the power of the ferryman. Because whatever it is, the child is physically, bodily being transported into the Nowhere. Actually physically. In such a manner that you can think that the dream world is a physical, actual, real place, and not just a thing that has been imagined. As if it wasn't difficult enough to keep all of the 100 locations that are important to the story straight, we now also have to keep at least 2 realities on the table as well, and have both of them have their sinister villains. Otto the counselor, in the diegetic real world, is actively abusive and manipulative and is, of course, an adult, which makes him instantly a villain in this franchise. However, we don't really know if the ferryman counts as a villain. The wiki says that he is an anti-villain, but I don't even know if that's true. The concept of the anti-villain mirrors the concept of the anti-hero. You've got basically these 4 alignments in a story. You have the hero, the one who's trying to fix the thing. You have the anti-hero, the one who begrudgingly is trying to fix the thing, even though they don't really feel like it. You have the villain, the one who is causing the thing, and therefore that same SAT-style relationship word problem makes the anti-villain someone who is reluctantly working on the side of the villain, or towards the thing, whatever the thing is. It has been posited, apparently, that the ferryman is an anti-villain, in that he is working with the villain. I guess in this case it's the Maw as an entity. The station of the lady. I don't even know if that's true. Like, I wonder if that's giving him too much negative agency in the story. 'Cause, like, he literally gives Noon a chance to escape from her impending death from her physical ailment, her actual literal brain cancer, and the abuse that she receives at the psych ward by coming to the Nowhere. That gets rid of it. It's done completely. And he never forces anyone to go anywhere. Whenever he shows up in a time where they are having a bad time, and he offers them a hand. And if they take it, he takes them out of that situation to a different place. Which doesn't feel like a villain to me, you know? Ostensibly, he takes them to the Maw. Okay, technically, we don't know if that's all there is to his job. And the Maw does suck for children. We don't see any evidence of a hand being offered and then ultimately refused by any of these children either, which makes me believe that he's either really persuasive despite only very rarely speaking, and we only ever see him actually say anything in the podcast, not in the comics where he's shown up, incredibly manipulative and very smart, or he's legitimately one of the only non-child beings in the nowhere that's trying to help the children in the only way that he knows how. But then, like, also, the podcast episode about the circus performer kids raises several even more points. Teenagers, those exist in this universe, and they apparently can find a way out of the nowhere by themselves. This means that the ferryman doesn't have inherent powers that allow him to go back and forth, but rather there's some sort of veil between the real world and the nowhere, and it's possible for people to just cross it somehow. But he is just extremely good at this task. I guess. Maybe. Because, like, in the circus performer kids episode, they've been planning their escape for, like, a really long time. And Noon shows up, and the main kid, I don't remember if he's got a name, he probably does. He's like, you gotta help us with our plan to get out of here. We hate it here. We're leaving. And Noon is like, I'm down, let's go. And apparently, at least one child gets away. All that is to say that there's a bunch of things that are now of questionable canonicity that exist within this universe, and it's starting to look and feel a lot like a Scott Kaufman kind of thing, minus the weird transphobia and the controversy that Scott Kaufman's got going on for him. Hopefully, minus, at least. I feel like we kind of know now a little bit more about why the comics were canceled, because they started to reveal a little too much about what was going to happen in the future, and Bandai Namco had to drop the hammer on it so that the people like us wouldn't get too suspicious and start picking things apart. There's a ton of stuff now anyway, way more than when I last did any work on this series, and is like so much of it is of dubious canon. Plus, I've been out of the scene, and I've not really been seeing anything about what the others have been saying about the story at all. I've seen a couple memes on TikTok, and I saw like the trailer for 3, and that's it. So I might say some like wildly unconventional stuff, or stumble my way into an idea someone else may have already had before. But in any case, I think we should start with trying to figure out levels of canonness, I guess, which I guess is what we're going to try to do in the next video. We're going to try to address all of the available pieces of information that we have, all of the pieces of media, and see what we can do to decide which things are fully canon, which things are dubiously canon, and which things are not canon. That's going to probably ruffle some feathers, especially because there's still people in the fandom that call the Runaway Kid 7. I want you guys to know that you guys are one of the reasons I quit this fandom before. You 7 kids. Thank you very much for coming and watching. This is a very rambly video that is only kind of like me trying to organize some of my thoughts before I dive into more things. Because, like, I played through 2. I need to go back and just binge play. Maybe I'll do a big stream of it, like a whole day. Binge play through 1, binge play through very little, binge play through 2, and then binge read the comics and the online comics. Like, it wouldn't be very fun to, like, listen to the podcast together, and also I wouldn't be able to do that because I'm pretty sure that's not fair use. We're gonna see if we can't do something like that maybe in the near future, and we'll just try to figure out what's going on and what is canon and what is not in this franchise. Anyway, thank you very much for coming and watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, the like and subscribe buttons are just below this video. You know where to push them. You've been here on YouTube before. I hope that my ability to continue putting out a video once in a while will still be enough for you guys to consider it worthwhile to continue being subscribed to my channel. If you aren't already subscribed, please click that button. The motivation is so difficult to muster up to make videos when the world is as messed up as it is right now, but that helps. Everything helps. Every little bit of motivation, every little bit of like upward motion helps. So anyway, but thank you very much again, and we will see you next time. Bye.